Hello, everyone. Uh, I was supposed to actually be having an interview today, but I kind of jumped the gun on it. So I thought to myself, I was talking with a bunch of people in the Discord, which you could hop out if you find in the description. You can hop in and see what's going on. But we decided to go ahead and move on with the live stream anyhow. So what we're going to do, as the title says, moving to Rumble, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, no. All the content is still going to be on YouTube. All of Pangburn content is still going to be on YouTube. But what we are doing is we are moving. This is what happened. So we all know that Rumble is like the dumpster fire of like the internet. It's where conspiratorial voices show up. It's where people who couldn't stay monetized on YouTube, who couldn't stay monetized on platforms that actually care about, well, you know, saying ridiculous, non-conspiratorial things, and they moved to Rumble. But Rumble contacted Pangburn, Travis Pangburn, about the Pangburn Universe and wanted the content to be on Rumble as well. So we managed, I guess, to find some sort of deal, and we're going to do a show on Rumble called the Pangburn Royal Rumble, which is going to be between myself, Thomas, Masha, John, and Tart, who are other Pangburn producers. And you're going to see Thomas's face in a second. He's off screen right now in the whole chat with everyone speaking, but I'm going to bring him in. We're going to talk about it. But what's important here to recognize is that we're not trying to be like anyone else on Rumble. We're not going on to Rumble to become a Rumble trope, to be a part of the quote-unquote Rumble that they're having over there. The main goal is to bring the same high level of discourse that we have here onto that platform, right? Make sure we're interviewing professors. Make sure we're actually looking at facts. Making sure that everything is like in the goal of maximizing well-being and participation for the viewers. Like, we care about truth, we care about good discourse, we care about good dialectic. This is what the point of this is. So the question, why go on to Rumble? Well, because they're willing to have us. That's really how simple it is. Any place that's willing to take us on, give us a chance, share our views, we're definitely interested in doing. Now, if you've been watching my channel and my streams for a bit, you know that I tend to lean left with my opinions. You can, it's pretty easy to see where I come from. And I'm very excited about sharing that with the Rumble audience. Am I going to get pushback? Of course. But that's the best part of it, is how do we, under fire, under contention, under name calling, stay stoic, move the conversation along, and stick to the facts. That's at least like what I want to do overall. Our first show is going to be July 21st, Friday evening. We'll post the time more appropriately. And I'm also going to post right now in the chat for everyone watching it in the future, or watching it right now, who are all in the Discord anyhow. Well, you should go and subscribe to the Pangburn Hangout / Pangburn Universe on Rumble. That's going to help us start things up and start things going. I know that for our first show, I know we're probably going to have people like Lawrence Krauss coming in, or Michio Kaku coming in to call in, and we're going to have a really good time and hang out and just discuss various topics. So for today, because we couldn't have the interview, I still have one of my besties. This is Thomas. Thomas, you're on screen. People can hear you now. And
Hello.
the rest of the pantheon of great minds and just people in the Discord, as we can see here, to just have a conversation about really whatever it is that we're talking about at the moment. And I just hope that it treats everyone well. Well. So that's what we're doing. We're moving on to Rumble, not exclusively, but we're also going to stream on Rumble while streaming on here. And of course, I'll still have my regular show going on. So yeah, let's do it. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah. So
and
before
real
the break,
quick, I just want to shout out to Casey. Casey has been an amazing friend, and they have really been helping out, and they're gonna be really active here. Anyone who's watching this should consider KC as moderator admin status on my channel. Just want everyone to know that. What they say goes, period, end of story. Don't even argue with them. So they have the power. Well, anyhow.
KC, you rule. But yeah, before the break, we had some topic ideas, and I think both Wellspring and Detrock, were you the one who was gonna come in there a minute ago, or am I just remembering Wellspring?
I'm not sure.
Detrock, you can unmute if you want to. Yeah.
have anything particular that I wanted to discuss right
Okay.
now, but happy
Yeah,
to
I thought you
participate.
were one of the ones. Yeah, absolutely. So Wellspring, what was what you were about to say a moment ago? Do you remember that?
Yeah, somebody said that they want to have good faith conversations with right wingers and they think that they might be able to change minds. Um, I want to comment on what I think is a large part of the motivation on a large sort of a non-trivial cross-section of the right wing population's motivations and why I don't think you'll have a lot of success in making inroads and changing quote unquote their minds. Um, One easy way to try to get an idea of what the essential mindset of a right winger is to look at the difference between a libertarian and a right winger, a libertarian and a conservative, quote unquote, then, right? So, in theory, at least, libertarians and conservatives are supposed to be fairly similar on economics, although recently conservatives have been becoming very big spenders and not really very much for the free market. But in theory, anyway, they should be both economically very similar. So it's in the social realm that they differ. And on the social realm, what is the difference between libertarians and conservatives? Well, libertarians are for liberty in social affairs. They don't want to control anyone else, and they don't want to pass laws to control, say, women or minorities and whatever else. So, what is the difference between a libertarian and a conservative? Well, conservative advocates for immigration controls, um, labor controls to protect certain classes of manual laborers or so on and so forth, and controls on women. And you compare libertarianism to conservatism. That's really the three main differences that you find. And you drill into the motivations, and you find that well, really, what they're trying to do is provide some small set of safety nets for certain types of men. They want to pass labor controls um, to give some safety to certain types of, say, manual laborers. They want to pass immigration controls to protect certain categories of laborers from competition from outsiders. And they want to pass laws to control women to give certain
Okay.
categories of men a better
So to
chance,
explore this a
right?
bit further, why do you find that the Libertarian Party, at least in North America, tends to align ideologically and at least in their with the GOP, with the Republican conservative traditional establishment? Because I find that a lot of that comes due to the share of values, but rather a lack of ability, not the same means by which they want to achieve that value. Libertarians try to take a much more decentralized approach, whereas Republicans and conservatives don't take a centralized approach. They still both technically want to maintain the status quo in society. They want to maintain the way in which things are currently happening. Like libertarian notions of economy still will favor those who currently have material controls, even without government.
My understanding of the reason why libertarians tend to tack with the GOP is because the GOP at least used to give, it used to be somewhat economically free market, and it used to at least give lip service to the free market.
But did they really?
Lately, they don't really do that.
I don't think they did. Under Bush, they didn't. Military spending under the GOP has been greater than in almost anywhere else. It's GOP Canada. It was literally the Democratic Party under Clinton that stopped the deficit. That had a surplus in the economy, which is bad for the economy. That's a whole other argument. Republican voices for a very long time have been always pro big government.
And on that score, libertarians have been against the GOP. But my understanding is there was a strategic alignment, mostly because libertarians consider economics being a little more important than social stuff. But as things are right now, libertarians tend to feel very disenfranchised from both the Democrats and Republicans because they aren't even getting the economic stuff from the Republicans anymore. So, it was a strategic kind of alignment, mostly for economic reasons.
No, what do you think?
Real quick, Dandan, may I ask?
Yeah.
Dandan, may I ask you a question? Can you, for the audience and just for future listeners, can we delineate what a libertarian versus a conservative is of the GOP in the United States? Because I'd like that definition too. I don't know the exact distinction.
I would say that libertarians, if you just look at the political parties, the conservative party is usually the GOP, the Republican Party. They have a whole different establishment to the Libertarian Party, but they have a lot of overlap with one another. For example, in 2020, the Libertarian candidate Joe Jorgensen wanted to eliminate the Department of Education and the EPA. DeSantis, who's currently running, says that he wants to eliminate the Department of Education and the EPA from the federal government. These two things overlap. It's a type of powering down, taking away the scope. Libertarians, in a way, really want hands out. They want government to have less involvement in economic affairs. They want to have less government involvement in day-to-day life. And the GOP...
So small government.
Quote unquote small government, which is just, yeah.
Seems like that would end up with tribalism, right?
I would say in many respects, yes, that's what it does end up with. It ends up being with
I'm not making an absolute statement. I just thought I'd see a connection there. I didn't mean to interrupt you too.
Yeah, and conservatism, at least American conservatism, would just be straight down the line Republican.
Yeah, traditionalist, maintain the status quo,
evangelical base, war on Christmas.
So do libertarians want the small government, but they're people who are like, smoke weed if you want to, I don't care.
Yeah, right? Or like marriage shouldn't even be a state institution, or government should not have any say in what's happening in the economy. We should just be left entirely up to free market.
So you would just have a shitload of in groups, is what it sounds like to me.
Sometimes, yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Is there any society? And I'll shut up in a second. Is there any society on Earth that is full libertarian or mostly libertarian?
Just look at countries where I think governments really don't have as much of a say or power over what happens in the private sector. Somalia, Mexico, right? They're very libertarian areas. It's much more of a Wild West than in developed countries.
Okay.
A whole lot of things have been said. I'm not going to tackle most of them. I'll just say one thing, which is, I think Dandan just said that Somalia is a libertarian area. I just want to point out that Somalia, I'm not trying to sort of start up a whole capitalism versus socialism debate, but Somalia, prior to the current state that it's in, it was ruled by the Somali Revolutionary Socialist Party, and it's nothing more than a failed state that was produced by socialist policy. It's not some kind of example of libertarianism or the outcomes of libertarianism. It is not itself libertarian right now.
No, it just has no government. It's I'm saying it's decentralized. When it comes to the economy, for example, I mean, would you disagree that libertarians would like as least as possible government necessary, except to instantiate property rights?
Yes, but remember, the property rights are the essential thing. You can't just have the initiation of force everywhere, as it is in Somalia, and then call that libertarian. Libertarianism is...
That's like saying that's not true socialism, right? There's some libertarians who might argue that the government shouldn't even be involved in property recognition, right?
Property enforcement.
Or recognition, recognizing property. Not much of a difference there.
It depends. Sure, you could say that there's full anarchists who would say that it should just be, you should have like competing courts and competing competing enforcement systems and so on. There are libertarians like that, absolutely. But even among those, the common thing that they hold is that they do hold that private property should be the law. Just they have a different idea of how it should be enforced, right? They still would say whatever the enforcement mechanism is, private property should definitely be the law.
Or should be the highest point in the law. That's like the thing that matters the most is private property. That's like what government should really be focused on, as opposed to anything else.
Yeah.
Is that what libertarians think?
That's a good steelman of libertarians. They might disagree on how to do that. Some don't want government at all even involved in the instantiation of property. But
are they mostly traditionalists, or are they status quo people, or are they not? What's the leaning on that?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
From the libertarians that I've spoken to, a lot of them are just like, no, do whatever you want. They don't want to they don't really care about the status quo.
Yeah.
Most libertarians are fairly liberal. They are quite literally classical liberals.
Which would be right wing, by the way, in the current Western ethos.
Right wing in the current Western thought tends to refer to social traditionalism. It doesn't actually refer to economic. In America, the right wing has a connotation that also associates with economic free markets or economic individualism. But let's say in Europe, there's no notion of economic individualism with right wing, so to speak, right? And increasingly in America, the notion of the right wing, so to speak, doesn't really associate itself with individualism. In fact, the majority of right wingers are kind of anti-individualism now.
Um,
But it used to.
I don't know if I agree with that, because when we look at the things political pundits and politicians say, especially those on the right wing, those in the biggest right wing media outlet online right now, the Daily Wire, they entirely talk about the individual as the thing that's important.
Ben Shapiro repeatedly says, almost every episode, he says that atomic individualism is bad, and that you exist as part of a society, and you exist in your small communities, like your church, and your family.
But the government should only but the government should only recognize individuals and individual rights and not collective rights, right? So like, whether or not they say, oh, you are part of a church or part of a community, they don't want that community to have anything to do with government, right? They're entirely always about government should recognize individual rights, not collective rights, not collective ideas, not ideas of collective determination, but rather individual determination.
I don't think I agree. Conservatives would say that they would try to do a kind of a mixture thing where they would say anything to do with their religious notions of morality, they will have government come in and collectively impose. But if it's something to do with trying to keep the government out of the church, they want to give the church as much freedom as possible. So the reason they tend to give lip service to the notion of individualism is because they want to limit the government for the sake of giving the church more power.
Correct.
Right?
Which means that when it comes to like individual action, they focus like government and politically, because when we're talking politics, what happens in the church, if you want to separate that, there's nothing to do here. But it's not even within the question of public policy or public purview. But when they talk about individualism, they're always talking about from the perspective of the government. And I think that's the perspective that we're talking about it as well. Because we are talking about government as that which instantiates or recognizes property. Well, it's property of what? Of individuals.
Can I just point out something? We're slightly conflating two things, which is limited government and individualism. You can have individualism with a government that has a pretty big size.
Yeah, of course.
That may be necessary. Let's say Israel, right? Israel might need to have a very large government for the sake of, defending from surrounding nations, but it may have an individualist property policy. But it could be a pretty big government.
Yeah, they're not exclusive. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I was just saying,
cool.
they still focus on the individual. That's the main philosophy they talk about. This is why they bring on Jordan Peterson. Has to be a part of the Daily Wire, because his entire focus is about individuals. He consistently talks about the evils of non-individual notions of like governance.
My position on Jordan Peterson, as far as I understand what he's saying, he says something along the lines of, clean up your room, take responsibility. But the whole notion of responsibility is not an individualist notion to begin with. Duty ethics is not individualist, but let's put that aside. His notion is not about being an individualist in the sense of what? Having your rights enforced against the entire world, even if the entire world wants to say violate your rights. Rather, he is sort of more this collective notion of you have a community and life is suffering and you have to fix yourself up so that you can help the world, and you do this within the context of some sort of a religious community, right?
Well, I've done an unhuman amount of research into Jordan Peterson, as I am working. For anyone watching, I'm working on a video essay about Jordan Peterson. And I can assure you that he's talking about individualism, hyper-individualism. I assure you that with every fiber of my being. Jordan Peterson thinks that the individual is at the core of everything, and that it's like individual actions, individual beliefs, individual behavior that what needs to be focused on, and then will stratify into the community, rather than thinking about like communal duty or duty to your people. No, it's duty to yourself, duty to your well-being, duty to the Christian ethos. He blends in Christianity with it, but he focuses on like the individual, the myth of the hero, very, very strongly. right? This way he has allegories into you have to go into the cave as a hero to get the gold and beat the dragon, right? This is what he consistently puts at the center as a person's striving, a person's understanding of their shadow, their anima, whatever it might be, from his Jungian lens.
I'll be very interested in watching your analysis of Jordan Peterson. What I understand, and I could be wrong, is that he takes it is very difficult to establish any kind of duty ethics without having some sort of duty to something other than yourself, right? I'm not aware of the ability for duty ethics to reference something other than yourself, because that would just be an ethics of self-interest. If the only thing from which you're, as Emmanuel Kant would talk about, Kant would talk about an inclination. If you have any inclination, where inclination there means, any self-interested motive, an inclination toward some selfish desire that motivates your actions, then that's not action from duty, right? Kant would say action from duty is that has no inclination at all, no self-interest. So
Kant has his different notions of his rule-based. But Jordan Peterson is saying that's God. So your duty is to quote unquote God. Everyone has whatever it is their highest good. He will call that God. He says this way. He says atheists believe in God, right? That's exactly why he says it, because he recognizes that. But he still thinks like politically and philosophically the individual is at the bedrock, and that's what needs to be focused on at all times.
So I'll be honest and admit that I can't quite find the right middle terms to build the syllogism to say that he has an explicit collectivist notion. I can say that his ethics is definitely not egoist.
No, it's not egoist.
I don't find that. Yeah,
it's not egoist.
I don't find the links. I can't find myself making a strong argument that it's collectivist. So I can't support my position too well. I'll see ground.
I mean, but don't you always hear him say, "Oh, the collectivist Marxist"? He consistently talks about that. That's what he really. Yeah. The postmodern neo-collectivist Mark, he really is against that notion. Now, do I agree that he has undercurrents of like a collectivizing? Yeah, of course he does, because he, at the end of the day, for lack of a better term, I believe Peterson is a fascist, proto-fascist adjacent thinker. And he always has like this group public will that he talks about. But that's not explicitly what he argues for.
I think I can agree that I was wrong in saying that he's not an individualist. He's not an egoist, but that's not the same as saying he's not an individualist politically. Sure. I think I was wrong.
Yeah.
And back to the conservatives, and Jordan, not Jordan Peterson, but say Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, what's the name of that other guy? Michael Knowles, what's his name? Ron DeSantis, all these people, they're definitely collectivists, and the conservatism, as we know it today, there are two main attributes of it that would distinguish it from libertarianism in a really strong way, which is, the first is that modern conservatism is not pro-free market. And second is that modern conservatism, well, not modern conservatism. Conservatism has always been collectivist on the social realm. And let me just make sure to tie off an initial point. The reason the point I was making that I came onto the show with was that the reason why I don't think you'll be able to reach out to these Rumble conservatives and theocrats and whatever is because they have motivations, which is mostly to control women and to kind of give certain classes of men a leg up in, say, the dating scene and whatever, and that's why they want to control women and so on and so forth, right? Something like that. I don't think you'll be able to go against those motives.
But I think that what's important to recognize is that you're not going to change minds in a conversation. That's never going to happen. But the way, like, I've had
changed your mind.
No, I don't think I've changed your mind. I think your mind wasn't. You didn't have like a set rule per se. You might also be more advanced. But when we're talking about these prototypical conservatives, what we're talking about is the prototypical conservatives that will appear on Rumble and are part of the Rumble fan base, right? Those who have followed, those who have been kicked off almost every platform they have been on because of the ridiculous things that they say and how they say it. What's important there is to say things in a way that the audience hears it, exposes to it. And then over a long period of time, mind changes. At one point, I was a very fundamentalist religious person. That has changed. At one point, I was an extremely racist and bigoted person in my young teens. That has changed when I was like 12, 13, 14, right? That I have changed my mind on those issues. And I believe that if I was able to do it, other people can do it. It's just a matter of exposing them to the ideas, exposing them to good conversations. And with that, things are going to move forward. I think that when we look just policy-wise, we look at how that affects people's mind. We know that when people have access to information and they hear specific information, their mind changes. Right? If for example, if Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump never talked about a stolen election, no one's going to think the election was going to be stolen because there's no evidence for it. Right? Their minds were changed because they were just had access to information, and vice versa. There are people who are flat earthers who are no longer flat earthers. And if we can reach even one person, I think that's a success.
Yeah.
If your goal is to, if you're like, if we can reach even one person, then okay, sure, you'll probably reach at least one person, definitely.
Yeah.
I think maybe I would say that, the majority of these people have an intransigent particular goal, which you're not going to be able to override by using, say, reason and information.
No.
Which is, these are, say, there's a whole bunch of young men and they want to have a family and a girlfriend or something, and they're like, oh, well, modern women are too free because of feminism and we need to destroy feminism so I can get a girlfriend.
Well, what if I tell you, but I can just say, if you want a girlfriend and if you want this and this and this, there's other ways of doing it. Bring people to talk about it, right? They are just hearing this one narrative. They are just seeing this one voice. Their media ecosystem has funneled them into a specific set of beliefs. But if you want a girlfriend, you want a wife, you want happiness, here's another way of approaching it. Here's another way of looking at it. You don't want a submissive woman. That's not going to make you happy. That's going to make you sad. But you want a partner. You want this. You want someone who you could flourish with. And talk about these ideas in a way that appeals. Because at the end of the day, it's not like they don't. Everybody generally wants a partner. Everyone generally wants someone. We're social creatures. They are resentful and don't really know how to get that. And they have attached themselves to these quote unquote strong men. But we can show them another option, another feature. This is something Destiny has been really good at doing with that incel community, right? He completely dismantled Sneeko and other thinkers on that side, and they have completely inserted himself into that community and has broken them apart. I think it is possible. I think to say that it's not possible just stands in the face of everything a liberal democracy stands for.
Sure. Okay. Appeal to my liberal sensibilities. Sure. I wish you the best.
No, but don't you think that that's how that works? Activism, talking to people.
We're gonna be hopelessly optimistic. At least I'm gonna try to be.
I mean, I know I'm gonna get. I already know that I'm gonna be called a fat kike. Like I already know that's gonna happen, right? On Rumble,
I'm gonna be called a faggot.
Yeah, and we might just get demonetized right now on YouTube for using those words. Maybe I'll blur them out.
Yeah.
When I
I am
this.
gay, by the way, so I can use those words. You can't.
Guess that
not
is how
you,
that works.
not you, Dandan.
The royal you, the royal you, the royal you, the royal you.
Yes, the royal you. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm aware that's going to happen. I revel in that. Do you know how great it is when you make an argument so well that that's the only thing they can say back? That's great. That looks good. I don't mind that. That's fine.
I wonder if there sort of an issue though with characterizing conservatives as being of a similar mindset, given that there's quite a lot of diversity, although perhaps less than American conservatives, if you wanted to target that group specifically. But even still, I think there's quite a lot of difference then between somebody who's a libertarian and somebody who's a neocon. They're going to have different ways of approaching foreign policy for sure. And the other issue as well is that a lot of conservatives seems to have very, very different views when it comes to the place of government versus how society should function are two very, very different things. And the conversations can become a whole lot less individualistic when you remove government from the picture.
I didn't really follow that. Do you mind saying that and clearing that up a bit?
Sure. So you're talking about conservatives as saying that they're very individualistic and brought up Jordan Peterson as an example. And I'm wondering how much of conservatism does he represent? And also, I get the sense that conservatives are not individualistic, and even in America alone, on every aspect of their ideology. It's only in certain parts, and usually relating to government.
Yeah, but we are talking generalities, or we're taking a very macro approach to this analysis. We're not talking about the individuals within the group, but we're talking about the general opinions of the group. We're talking about what the politicians are saying. We're talking about what the thinkers are saying, what the movers. That's kind of what we're talking about. So when you think of American conservatism, it does have this quote unquote small government, individualistic approach as they speak about it, while their actions, like I think Wellspring has said, they are pro government, they are pro laws and rules, just whenever it's convenient for them. I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah, but you're only looking at politics. You're not looking at their attitudes towards society in general. Like it's purely towards government, right? So their attitude towards government is often government shouldn't be involved, but that's not the whole of their opinion when it comes to how society should.
Yeah, because the government should only be involved insofar as it's beneficial for my ends, which would be beliefs like maintaining gender norms, maintaining specific power structures in society. That's really what it's going on. We're talking about political systems. We're talking about political parties.
There's a lot of division within conservatism on exactly the details of that thing, right? Because it's like even within, I'm saying even within American conservatism, because I mean, if you get to any other country in the world, you're going to have a whole different version of what it means to be conservative.
Yeah,
which will be so radically different. You'll be able to, relate on it. Like even my country has a different version of conservatism than American does, right? So the other aspect of this as well is that if we're talking about what conservatism is, right, fundamentally, like it should be the definition, right? And you should say that that a lot of conservatives who follow a particular person, because I really hate when people generalize based on left and right divide, because it's such a low resolution means, and you're gonna alienate people who don't fit into that, who maybe identify as conservative but have unusual beliefs, not the same as everyone else who does.
We're not. It would be akin to saying, when we look at society, we see when we think of the way women behave, we have like a schema, and we can talk about that. That doesn't mean that every woman behaves in the general way that women behave, or men behave in the general way men behave. And if anyone's listening, I'm not trying to single out anyone. I'm just specifically speaking about it's literally in generalities, taking a macro approach. And I don't see what the danger here about doing that it has utility, right? When we think of left and right, abolishing hierarchies as opposed to instantiating hierarchies, right? That's fine. We can think of things in that way.
Are you sure you fully thought through the whole idea of treating men and women in general groups and expecting the same behaviors from each based on their gender is like that's an extremely negative thing, and I wonder like if bringing that up helps my side of the argument better than yours in that regard.
But I'm not. It doesn't. We don't have to talk about it in a negative way, right? It just doesn't have to be. We can speak about it without the implication that it's good that it's this way, or we can just talk about some realities of. We look at people who identify as conservative in America. What is generally their beliefs, and we can talk about those general beliefs without saying that is necessarily true of a conservative.
Can I come in here and say something that might be useful? I think Tree is complaining basically that we're only looking at the way that conservatism manifests in the political sphere. We're not talking about how conservative outside of the political sphere, how they actually organize their lives in their communities and in private. But to an extent, that's to be expected, because there's probably a Western liberal bias in the way that we in this channel are talking already. So we're already coming from this point of view that we don't have an interest in how they privately organize. We're only interested in how their private organization manifests itself in the political sphere, because the political sphere is where they are advocating for policies that are to be enforced by force. That's what we actually care about, right? That's why we only to some extent, we only need to care about their political manifestation, because that's where force comes into the question.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not we're trying to ignore every other facet of their life. It's just that we're saying it's not relevant for this particular analysis.
I mean, I think ignoring the other aspects of how a country runs and just focusing entirely on things like, especially like national politics within America, is a really, really bad idea because well before any trend occurs in law, it occurs before that in culture, at a much more more difficult to define realm. And the other thing is like there's the lagging effect in terms of who gets voted in versus like the Tea Party, for example, right? That's an effect that occurred, when the Tea Party gained control, when they managed to basically hijack the entire Republican Party. That was happening in the works for quite a long time before it actually created that impact. And there's a lot of people who are alienated from the Republican establishment in the conservative side of things. I'm definitely pretty far left, but I just think like if we characterize the right in this way, we're going to make bad predictions, and as well as that, our arguments are not going to be convincing because they will not hold true to the reality that is experienced by the person we're trying to convince.
But we're not necessarily trying to convince anyone right now. We're talking about these ideas as they are understood, right? So, like, if I would ask you, Tree, how do you understand conservatism as opposed to libertarianism? What would you say?
Well, I mean, I'd say the words are overloaded, right? But I mean, like on the base, if you're like, I mean, the idea is simply like libertarianism. You could say it's freedom. It's a desire to be free from government, and conservatism is desire to limit change. But the thing is that you can use that word in so many different contexts and utterly be talking about politically unrecognizable things. Like, say, if I was to say Indian conservatism.
But we're talking
right?
specifically about North American conservatism and North American libertarianism.
Well, the other thing as well is you got Tulsi Gabbard in Congress as well, right? Or so like, I mean, you don't have a lack of Indian conservatives in America as well, and you've quite a lot of different people from different countries who have different backgrounds as well, right? And I mean, you have Andrew Yang, wasn't it, the Asian American, right, who's running for Congress? You have a lot of diversity in there, right? So I think and especially it's worth considering as well how immigrants often align in conservative ways, like or the way that the Republican Party is struggling with trying to court the Latino vote, right? Because there are conservative Latinos who are interested in voting for the Republican Party as long as they can stop being racist a little bit, just enough at least, anyways, to not cross that line of you're all bad. In order to vote for them.
But do you recognize how that is different than what me and Wellspring were trying to talk about?
Maybe I can clarify here.
Yeah.
I just want to say, so Trees, I think you're worried that we are generalizing conservatives outside of their political manifestation. We're not. We are not saying anything about conservatives beyond what they come together and put forward as their political manifestation. They may have a series of very different motivations behind those political policies that they put forward in the political realm. We are not making any comments about those. We're just saying when they come together in groups to do politics, they manifest themselves in these particular policies. And these policies are what we are talking about. We're talking about political conservatism. We are not trying to generalize them anywhere beyond their political manifestation.
Well, like, I mean, even to be more specific, you're talking about Jordan Peterson, who's not a politician, right? You're talking about, like, even if we were talking about the Republican Congress, you're not talking about all politics. You're just talking about the legislative politics, right? Like, I mean, we wouldn't be including like what the Koch brothers, their influence, and the Heritage Foundation, and all the think tanks that are active. You wouldn't be including the NRA. You wouldn't be including, like, there's just so many different things which have like all these kind of local effects that occur.
But Jordan Peterson is and Tucker Carlson, for example, the reason why I will bring up both, because these two people are very much movers of conservative Republican thought in North America. So
they express political opinions.
Yeah.
They do express political opinions.
So talking about their opinions is a good way to recognize what is it that people are speaking about. What is it that is influencing thought? I mean, someone who exists in the space a long time, I can hear arguments and be like, oh, I know where you heard that from. I know who said that before you're repeating it. And the same way with me, you can be like, oh, that's a talking point. Like, yeah, I've heard this from Richard Wolff. I heard that from Zizek. But when we look at the broader body of conservatives in the United States, and as they manifest politically, and you look at the overall, what is the arguments they're making, where does their ideology stem from? It does fall in line with these notions that we're talking about. Like, we can talk about pro-life and pro-choice movement and speak about the specific arguments they make, and that's fine. We're not generalizing it to everyone. We're just saying that this is something that is being talked about. And I don't think that is dangerous, as long as everyone watching knows that we're not generalizing. We're not saying that everyone is like this. We're not saying that there's more intricate things. And being conservative all around the world is not the same thing, and it changes from place to place. These are not facts. These are relative things, depending on where you are, what political systems you're in, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, well, I don't want to go in circles on it, so yeah.
May I just ask a quick question for clarification for myself, Dandan?
Mm-hmm.
What were you just saying real quick? Refresh my mind.
I was just saying that we're not generalizing. Oh, conservatism can change from place to place.
Yeah. I remember my question now. Thank you. So is there a specific thing about the political manifestation of the GOP in America that wants to maintain hierarchies and traditions? Is that correct?
Yeah, they're right. I mean, even the Democratic Party is right wing.
Do other Republican or right wing governments across the world, do they also want to abolish hierarchies? Is that like a universal across
the universal
all
on the right?
conservatives?
If right wing generally, because the middle point always shifts and moves, right? So you have to recognize that the middle point can shift and move throughout time. But when we say right wing, we're simply saying those who want to maintain the current hierarchies and status quo in general. Conservatives, that's usually what they are. As to progressives,
So it can be abstracted.
We can say that the right wing before the fall of the USSR was communist. Like, we can say that. That's fine.
Gotcha. That was my only question.
I mean, Marcus,
I don't
you'll know that Marcus says that the Nazis were left wing because he wants the monarchy, and they're too radical for him, right? So if he puts himself at the center, that's fine. But then globally, things change depending on the scope. Right? When we look globally, both the Democrats and the Republican Party are right wing. But we look at within the United States, the Democrats appear to be left wing. So,
yeah, I mean, I think left and right wing are kind of ill defined, and you really need to say what you mean by that first before you can put things into those categories effectively.
Oh, so when I say right wing, I mean on political beliefs or political ideas that are trying to keep or instantiate specific hierarchies that are already present in society, as opposed to left wing wants to change, ameliorate, or abolish them.
Well, then, in some sense, the Nazis were going more rightward in the sense that they were trying to reinvigorate the what had been destroyed by the previous emperor, right? So
yes,
so in a sense, like it's hard to really define the differences between returning to like an authoritarian control entirely ruled by the Kaiser versus the idea of acting with the like acting to basically return power to a single person, but like have all of the trappings of dictatorial society back in place.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the Kaiser did preside over the Weimar Republic, so in a sense, you could argue that that putting the power back into the hands of somebody who is responsible for that could be seen as right wing or something, or could be seen as
we can also look at this analysis, right? The fascist party, the Nazi party, wanted to keep the power hierarchy, the means, in the hands of white Germans. That was what they wanted. They wanted to maintain the structures in such a way where white Germans had control over the infrastructure, as opposed to those other ethnic groups. That is trying to maintain that hierarchy, trying to maintain those resources in society stratified in such a way. We can call that right wing, as opposed to revolutionaries who generally want to either change it, right? Put the power in a new hierarchy or abolish the hierarchy entirely.
But also another point as well to raise is that like Nazism is incredibly not as collectivist. It's not
Yes, correct.
individualist.
Correct. It is.
Yeah.
It's extremely collectivist. Oh, fascism, for those who don't know, the symbol for fascism is an axe covered with a bunch of other sticks. And the idea is that all together they have the power to like change society, move things. It's an entirely collectivist movement. And this is where I think Jordan Peterson is really unique, is because I believe that Jordan Peterson sells a form of libertarian fascism. And that's a whole other story we can get into.
Well, it's actually an interesting thing to talk about. And it's difficult to categorize him as being libertarian fascist, but I think why he's useful to the right is because he's able to phrase their religious social conservatism in non-religious terms, and that's why
Yes.
they like him. They like him because he calls God, your highest ideal, and he says, various different things that make religion sound plausible without having to use supernatural language. And basically, he's found a way to buttress their theocracy in secular sounding terms. And in that sense, I'm not sure I mean, where do you think Jordan Peterson would come down if he had to choose between theocracy and libertarianism, a free society?
He would go on a free society side for sure. I don't think he would go down into theocracy.
Free society. Libertarians are in favor of transgenderism. They're in favor of gay rights. They're in favor of, abortion. They're in favor of. You sure he would come down on their side?
I mean, I think that he would say that is like torture and it shouldn't be, but he also wouldn't want government, in a way to be this is where he gets confusing. While he totally dislikes any transgender people. I don't think he has an issue with gay, but definitely transgender people. This is more, but he still grounds that in the libertarian notions, of which we have to help the individual. He's just really backwards on it. But politically, I don't think that he's okay with government going in and forcing people to do things. From everything that I've read about him, he's just not for that. He really hates any type of compulsion in any way, shape, or form. He's entirely hyperfixated with making sure that there's zero compulsion in any way, shape, or form. That's how he started his entire thing with his battle against Bill 616 in Canada. It was because of what he saw as compulsion. So I can't imagine that he would think that we have to compel people to be the gender that they don't want to be,
You have a much more charitable view of Jordan Peterson than I do. That's my response.
Well, I've read so much of his stuff, right? Because I am doing this project. So
I'll just watch it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want
like a belief system that seems to be, because like from everything I'm hearing from him or I've seen of him, it seems very, very focus grouped. Like it feels like I'm listening to any Republican who's trying to ensure that he doesn't get I don't know, someone doesn't come on the right of him and outseat him. Like it doesn't seem like he's an ideologue, more like a grifter.
What do you mean?
Like Jordan Peterson does not seem like he believes every word he is saying. He seems like he is selling to an audience. Like
I hear you.
Like I mean, there's definitely people on the right who do that, but there's not a lot of very like you can't really look at every single belief that or like where Jordan Peterson comes from, like a book or something on. I don't know. Like,
well, have you seen his conservative manifesto, as he calls it? He released a 2-part series and released it as a book, which is a conservative manifesto, a vision for conservatives, is what he calls it. And there he outlines his entire like metaphysics and idea about the world in general.
Okay. And does he say anything really controversial? Does he make really, really strong claims that are not incredibly open to interpretation?
In my opinion, no. he's very vague, but if you just take the time to read what he writes, it's quite clear what he argues for. And that's really and at this point, I'm just like talking about what I've been reading about him and what I've been learning about him. And I think maybe the best thing would just be to read the introduction to my video essay. We'll do a little, and we can talk about it if you're interested.
I see one of the issues though I find with like dedicating time to reading these sort of things is if somebody's just going to require you to read between the lines to understand what they're really saying, and it's all these kind of these statements that can be interpreted by everyone to think that it's about them personally or them, then I don't really trust.
It's not like Hegel. It's not like Hegel. Okay, you can tell what he's saying when he says it. He argues for a specific thing. I just think that his arguments just he's missing key things in his argumentation and what he's actually, and he doesn't even realize what he's even arguing for to begin with. But he makes specific claims. He makes very clear, he has like 13 verities that each individual should follow, these rules by which a functioning society can develop from. He's very clear about what those are. It's not like vague at all.
But at the same time, during his debates with Slavoj Žižek, right, I kind of expected him to go on there. That was around the time when he was still talking a lot more pro-capitalist, pro-individual kind of stuff, right? He used to come out and say, things like, capitalism is good and this and the other. He doesn't say that very much these days. These days, he tends to talk a whole lot more about religion is good. He doesn't talk a lot about the capitalism stuff.
Yeah,
so
because he believes.
So
he specifically talks in his Conservative Manifesto about free markets and capitalism specifically.
But during his Žižek debates, he basically buckled all the way under and just basically acceded that capitalism is problematic, and he didn't say anything redeeming about capitalism at all. In fact, he basically agreed with Žižek on every argument Žižek made that undermined capitalism, and I sort of wonder what's capitalist about him.
Well, the thing that he gave into Žižek on was actually the fact that he was ignorant on the topic, which was a whole other thing. I know my camera just stopped. It should start working again. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why this is going on.
It's all right. It'll pop back on.
Yeah, it'll pop. There we go. It's popped back on. But
there you go.
What I think he recognized from that conversation is that, within a capitalist structure, within an entirely free market structure, if people lose the bedrock for their telos, the bedrock for their morality, it's not going to work. That this freedom only exists insofar as we have some sort of adherence to a religious ideology. And that's really why he's pushing that forward now, because he wants freedom. He wants this capitalist free market society. He just thinks that's only going to work if we don't have this corruption brought in from an illegitimate academic source. He really plays on this. He really does continue the trope of the Frankfurt School cultural Marxism, cultural Bolshevism conspiracy theory from the 1920s, and has revived it as a postmodern neo-Marxist ideology in his conception. And that's where society is failing here. Not because it's free or not because it's capitalist, but because of, in his own words, where is it? I literally have it quoted here. A corrosive doubt sold not least by the careless intellect regarding the value of the principles of value. Aim in action has hereforth inspired, guided us, and stabilized us. And he literally speaks specifically about how this corrosive doubt, which is sold and not least, was pushed upon by these radical Marxist academics and have infiltrated into society, is what he's talking about.
Radical Marxist. Interesting. Go ahead.
I'll just have to say I'll be very happy to see a video. I would like to see where exactly he is well. I want to see how much pro-capitalist, how many pro-capitalist arguments he makes. He makes arguments about individualism, the structure of government. Yes. I don't know how pro-capitalist he is, but in a sense, individualism in policy will lead to capitalism. So, sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's really what he talks about.
Dandan, I think it's a good time to ask if anybody else maybe has a take they want to throw in.
Yeah. Everyone's just
Anybody?
listening.
D-Trunk, Perry, Concept, Casey. Oh, Casey can't. Ball, Tree. Anybody else? We just want to make sure everybody's heard here because we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes.
Oh,
So,
wow. That felt so quick.
Yeah, it's 1:23 for me, so it should be 2:23 for you. We started at 12 and we started about 12:20. So
Okay. Well, that's
about an hour.
Yeah.
About an hour. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's a great conversation y'all are
You know,
having. I'm learning a lot of stuff.
What I'm gonna do
real quick. I'm learning
Okay.
a lot of stuff, and I'm enjoying this. And I think the people who are watching this are enjoying it too. What were you gonna say?
No, keep going. I want to let you finish what you have to say.
That was it. I mean, I was just saying. I think the conversation between you, Tree, and Wellspring is really effective, and it's it's okay to disagree.
Mhm.
I usually lean towards a lot. Me and Dandan are almost identical in our political beliefs. So I'm just learning all this stuff. It's I'm just speaking from the politically ignorant mind here, but like I didn't know it all tied together in such a way. I just think it's really cool. I should probably stop there because I'm just babbling. But
Yeah.
really cool to learn all this stuff.
From the things you said to me, Thomas, I don't actually think you're very similar to Dandan at all. I think you're kind of a liberal, whereas I think Dandan is actually a leftist. I think those are fairly different. I think you're pretty different from Dandan.
I consider myself a liberal.
I can't say because I can't say because I don't know, so I'll trust you on that.
I consider myself a liberal, and a lot of people on usually more on the libertarian side think I'm a leftist. People on the left think I'm a liberal. Some people call me a centrist. I get called all sorts of things. I think maybe I'm definitely not a centrist. I do identify more on the left, but I don't consider myself a leftist. I don't really necessarily vibe with notions of like the Antifa crowd, or I'm not definitely for like there was no real communism being tried out there. No, I'm not. I like free markets. I'm for free markets. I also don't think we should have just a free market. I do believe in some government mechanisms and our abilities to intervene in markets in sectors that don't apply to the demand supply curve lines and all that.
Do you ever think there's going to be a society that doesn't have some kind of controls on the free market?
No, I don't think how we could even have and how do we can separate an economy from its society. It doesn't make sense to me.
What would just full-blown laissez-faire capitalism be in a society with no regulations, right?
It would just be monopolies and oligopolies and stuff like that.
Okay.
Do I support unions? I do support unions, but I think that unions are a manifestation of a system that has forced us to collectivize outside of the way in which we're supposed to do it, outside of a democratic means. That is my issue with unions. Unions are an extra bureaucratic establishment that sits parallel to our middle. We don't even need them technically. We should be able to bargain collectively as a people in general. That is fine. That is okay. We just don't have those mechanisms through government, so we have to do it through our own private associations, which then get their own level of corruptions because it's not like they have any laws or they don't have a monopoly on force. So,
but isn't that
the
problem is sort of like we don't need democracy because we should just know what the right idea to do is in some sense.
No,
right?
I want democracy, but I don't think unions are democratic by means. Unions,
a means of negotiating collectively with an employer. Surely that we should support people who have that means. Obviously, if there's some sense of corruption or something like that, that should be weeded out. But I mean, it seems like there shouldn't I don't see any society ever existing where it's not necessary for the workers to be able to negotiate with the boss.
I agree.
Being something critical to ensuring their safety, really.
Yeah, I agree. If you asked me today if I will vote, if I had two candidates in front of one of them pro-union, one of them not pro-union, I'm voting for the one that's pro-union. Let's just make that real. Like realistically, that's the way I'm going. I think that is a more beneficial thing.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it's worth talking about the ideals though, and understanding them fully though, because it's not just it's not just the case of unions have problems, and ideally we wouldn't need them. I mean, ideally we wouldn't need anything, but because I mean, a lack of scarcity would be awesome. But the reality, I guess, is that we have these kind of forces that are happening inside of whatever system that we need to
Give
mitigate
me 1
any negative
second.
impact.
Yeah, there's more. I'm gonna fix it up better. I'll be right out. Sorry, I apologize. But yeah, so when I say ideally, I'm just saying like I think that there are better solutions than unions, but right now union is a great solution for what we got. Is the best
What
thing.
do you see as the best solution in terms of workers being able to get their rights?
Workers are being interwoven into businesses and corporations where we recognize how workers are actually owners and have a stake in the corporations which they work for and have rights within that, where the company cannot just alienate their labor as something distinct or not a part of what they're talking about. Like, one of the things that I like and I argue for, and this is one of my beliefs, is that we should make it mandatory that full-time, or at least incentivize it, but I would like it mandatory that full-time employees in a company that's big enough need to get paid in shares in the company. Like, you just have to, because you are a part of that company. You have a stake in it now, and because of that, these people automatically have a seat at the board of directors or whatever it might be. Where we begin that transition into a participatory workplace, as opposed to one where you just take orders. You become a part of it. You have a say, and because you have a seat at the board of the you have shares. You have a seat there at the shareholders table because you are literally a shareholder. You start having the ability to negotiate your pay, to hold strikes without the ability of getting fired. And we already know this exists for people who finish their master's school. Most of my accounting friends, my friend who works at Adobe, my friend who works at PwC, my friend who works at Deloitte, they get paid in shares and they have a say in what's going on in the company. But they don't just get paid by salary. They also have a say in when they want to leave them. And the company has an option to buy the shares first. But in general, they become a participatory body. So right now, that participation in companies only exists if you were able to make it high enough in the academic chain. But if you're just a low, wage worker, you don't have that access. And I want that access for low wage workers as well.
Can I say a few things on this policy prescription?
Sure.
Companies tend to pay their higher ranked employees in shares, not because the employees, gain a benefit from that in voting or whatever. The types of employees who are paid in shares are the types of employees who have the power to walk away, and they already have a lot of influence in the company.
Yeah.
I get paid in shares at my current company because even if I didn't have shares, I would have a say in how my
Exactly.
group was run, and I would be able to choose my tasks. It, um, I would, in fact, benefit a lot more from not being paid in shares. But the company realizes that they want me to have an interest tied to them. So they pay me shares to ensure that my interests are aligned with them because
Yeah.
my financial position is tied to their outcomes. Technically, I would prefer to have all of my income in money, in just currency, right? The whole thing of paying people in shares is just a really easy way to give people a fluctuating asset, fluctuating instrument that is actually worth less in certain regards, unless you're in a very strong company.
I mean, so
And
I don't so let's put it this way. I'm not for saying you have to get paid in shares. I will absolutely continue this forward and say, if you don't want to get paid in shares, you just sell it right back to the company and take the money for it. You don't have to. No one's forcing you to keep that. Like, you can keep it if you want to. You want to sell it right away and take the liquid. You can do that. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. But I think that
absolutely.
But I think that a company, I mean, initially, like, should they be mandated? Sure, but I don't think that's feasible. We should make a tax incentive from a policy perspective to make it so it's worth it for them to do so. Therefore, including the workers in the participation of "quote unquote" governance of the company in a way.
So one big issue with that is that it's very difficult to determine the value of a company that isn't listed, because ultimately, in order to get listed, you would have to be audited, and going through an audit is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And if you can't estimate accurately the value of a company, then you have no idea what you're getting paid in.
Which is why I said this should only apply to companies that are currently publicly traded. I don't know how to do it with the companies that aren't publicly traded yet, but I can definitely think about it in a way with companies that are. Why is my camera fucking up all the time? I got to figure this out. That's really frustrating.
Another thing is that if you create a situation where people are being paid in something they have to share to turn into food, then anyone with low disposable income becomes they creates the same situation regardless, except with a fee for selling the shares, right? So the problem really is more that you need a system of representation in terms of decisions that isn't necessarily about ownership or amount of capital in your life.
Yeah.
It's more about
So I agree with that, which is why this is like an incremental step. This is not going to be a solution. This is not going to fix the problems. It's going to be one step along the way of being able to fix problems. Right? I think that it's important when we look at policy, we can't think of policy as the solution, but rather a thing necessary to start forming the solutions.
I think I want to point out. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm not sure that paying employees in shares has the outcome that you think it does. You seem to want to use the shares as a means, as a means to produce the effects of giving employees more say in their workplace. That's not how the shares work. Let's say you start giving low ranked employees shares in a company. All you've really done is make them, now their salaries are dependent on a fluctuating asset. They don't have as much financial security as they had before. And
why not?
Unless you're giving them,
they don't just get paid in share. You get paid in cash, but a certain portion of that you can get it in shares if you want.
You can already, in every company that you work at, assuming that, well, every company does have a share structure. You can just take some percentage of your salary and buy shares in your company if you want. The option is always available for you to buy shares in your company, assuming that they have shares on offer.
Yeah, but I'm not right. So we have to think. I'm not saying that, for example, someone who works at Walmart for $13 an hour in, I don't know, Mississippi or whatever it is, they can't even afford to go out and buy a share. Right? Again, this is not a comprehensive idea that's going to fix all the problems. We have to, minimum wage has to be raised. It has to be on top of that, they still have to have a livable wage while on top of that being able to get paid a share. We have to then start making laws regarding what percent of shareholders need to have representation. We have to take it apart. It's not going to, you're going to be able to find 1 trillion holes in this. As I said before, this is not comprehensive in any way, shape, or form. The idea is simply, for me, is this. We want workers to have a participatory say in their corporative structure. That's the important thing. And as long as we...
I think that if... Still here? Yeah, I think that if that's the outcome you want, I would say just vote to start democratizing companies. Okay, so for example, you said the shares should be in addition to the current salaries being paid. Assuming you can get that done, and let's assume an ideal world where you can't get anything you want done. Again, what would be the difference between paying them in salary and letting them buy shares if they want with that extra salary versus just giving them shares or just democratizing the workplace, right? Democratizing directly is just probably what you want to do.
Yeah, so the question is, within a system like we have now, how are we going to start? We can't just pass a law. You have to democratize the workplace. That's anti-free market. Like I told you before, I like free markets. I don't think the government should just come in and do whatever it wants. But what I want to see is an incentivization of the process, which would lead towards the democratization of the workplace. And in other areas in the world, I know the busing company in Israel did this. If you work for the company, you become a shareholder within that company. And that's how that operates. The public busing company works. And that seemed to be successful for a little bit. The model has changed and gone through at times. But I'm using that idea as a way of, if we can start to have companies incentivizing doing this, we can hopefully start moving the ball along, in which now workers become participants in their companies rather than just wage laborers. That's all it is. It's just a
Mind if I
step.
quickly point?
Just to
Do
add,
you mind if I quickly make a point?
Yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
Daniel?
We only have about, for me
It's
at
the
least,
same
15
point.
minutes left for the live stream, but we can keep talking.
Okay, it's a quick point that I will. I've mentioned it to you in private before, but I will for everyone else listening in. This is already the case in the financial industries, especially the banking industries worldwide, where during your first or your second contract, partially you get paid out in company shares of the bank which you are working for, which we see in the finance industry, which I think this is currently being applied at the largest scale. We see a giant conflict of interest between employees and employers, where um, all sorts of conditions are laid down by the employer upon the employee. When you can get your bonus paid out, when you can sell your positions, which you get paid out with, who pays taxes over it, who pays dividends tax over it. And the current way it is being used by banking industry is basically to enslave its employers more than it is already capable. Because by leaving that responsibility with the employer, you essentially neglect a giant conflict of interest, which is between the employer and the employee. So I thought I'd just point that out because I heard you suggest it again. And I do think this would, on a larger scale within different industries, which already are highly monopolized or monopolized, I think it would form even greater of a threat. Could you imagine, like, getting to work for a multinational like Google and essentially being enslaved by them? Because if you quit your job or you get fired, you will not be able to maintain your mortgage. You will not be able to sell off your shares, which you have built up over the past
Why
5
not?
or
Why
10
wouldn't you
years.
be able to? I mean, you can say that the company has to buy
Because
back
the
its
contract
shares.
doesn't allow.
No, so that's
Well,
why you create specific laws around those contracts. Again, there's
Right.
and I keep saying
Which
this,
then leaves the responsibility with the state.
huh?
That's another one. Well, so currently there is, in my opinion, too little regulation in regards to this, especially in regards to finance and its industry. But by saying, well, the state ought to be regulating these terms which can be met, that's precisely not free market capitalism,
No,
or
no,
at
no.
least a free
Again,
market, where you then leave the responsibility with the state.
free
right?
free
To
markets
sort
for
of-
me are very much. There's a difference between free markets and a command economy, and a free market might be exclusive, but regulations and free markets are not exclusive. You can have regulations within a free market. It's regulations themselves that create the possibility for free markets. Without regulations or monopolies, we wouldn't have free markets.
Right, but pragmatically speaking, currently what is the case is that we do kind of in the West have a authoritarian stance on contract labors, especially or labor contracts, especially in regards to the past. But what is currently the case is by regulating the terms of a contract in which a company gets to pay out its employee via shares, I think that would open up an entire can of worms. I think that would further essentially make the problem worse that we are all facing, which is 3 different parties with 3 different interests. I would salute, again, if your goal is to publicize or democratize labor, then the answer would be political rather than corporate. And, I think if that's the end goal, then you should be advocating for more publication and corporate publication by government.
Well, that would
To
I would
avoid
on,
these
I will
conflicts
only
to begin
argue
with.
for that in sectors that don't bend and move to the supply demand curve, like healthcare, for example, or the
But
military,
it
for
so
example,
did.
like for the military, for
Yeah, and it
example.
so does.
It doesn't
Right, like the
it
military
doesn't.
industrial complex.
The military is it's obviously a problem because we literally are just simply subsidizing these things like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, whatever it might be, as opposed to making sure that these are not just like for-profit companies.
Right. But that's been since time immemorial, my friend. Like,
Yeah, it
not
doesn't
just
mean it
Lockheed
has to stay
Martin,
that
which has
way.
been at it for like, Well, sure, but what I'm saying is we are speaking of three different parties who all three have different incentives. And a conflict arises when you lay the responsibility of democratizing and fair pay, etc., with solely the corporate party. Whereas if you then say, well, no, actually the state gets to further regulate business contracts, etc., well, then you're not solving the problem either, because now you're entrusting the state with even more authority, which I have seen nothing but abuse from, especially in the United States. I mean, much of the regulation that's being put in place lately seems to do the opposite of actually regulate the market. It seems to create more loopholes for big multinational corporations to abuse little guys, startup businesses, kill off.
I mean, yeah, we
ingenuity
can
or buy it
we can look at what happened with Amazon. We can look at what happens with Starbucks. You can look at the way in which Amazon has been buying out their competitors and small guys and just making, or if they don't accept the low buyout, they just oust them out of the market and create their own products to copy them. And by the way, anyone out there, don't ever buy Amazon basic stuff. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Amazon basics might be cheaper, but it's just the way in which what they're going to do. They're going to oust out their competition and they're just going to increase their prices. And especially in like the YouTube sphere, Amazon basics has so many different competitors to like lights and phone stands and mic stands in comparison to Newer, which is usually the other big company. There's plenty of businesses out there that are willing to sell you a good price. And also, if you do use Amazon, make sure to use Amazon Smile. It doesn't cost you anything more, and it just forces them to at least donate some of what some of your sell to whatever it is. A charity of your choice. I usually do Doctors Without
agree.
Border or something else.
Can I
Last,
come in
yeah,
here?
yeah, last thing, and then we're gonna have to cut the stream off.
Okay, I'm just going to clarify something. I didn't clarify. So I'm saying giving shares to employees, for most employees, shares are not freedom or power. Shares are chains. So I can use an analogy. Shares are like the company town. Company towns used to pay you in company bucks. They wouldn't pay you in US dollars. They would pay you in their own issued currency. So if you're working at McDonald's, they give you McBucks, and you can only buy stuff at places that accept McBucks or exchange them with McBucks itself. It's similar to that. They're paying you. The people. Okay, let's say you have some high-powered sales executive. He does not want to be paid in shares.
He doesn't have
The
to.
company knows that he can walk. Yeah. Well, that's not true.
No, I'm saying with
the
what I'm
company knows that he can
proposing,
walk away.
what I'm proposing, you can say no. You always
not
have
so
the
much
ability. What I'm proposing, I'm saying you might be right about the way it is right now. What I'm proposing is that you have the right to say no. I don't want to be paid in shares, and they have to say okay. Right? It should be an option for people. I'm not saying you have to, you don't have to. It's people should have the option to, and the company should allow that option.
Could you consider this argument for a short while and tell me what you think of it?
Okay.
What's the difference between that? And so it seems as if you're saying you're going to offer this extra stipends to employees, something in addition to their current income, which they can use to buy shares or not. In theory, then, if they don't accept the extra stipends as shares, in theory, they shouldn't be able to accept the extra stipends. Or, in other words, all you're really proposing, if you're saying that they should still get the stipends in cash if they don't accept the shares, all you're really proposing is an increase in salary.
I'm not saying I'm talking about an increase for low wage workers in general. Minimum wage should not be $7-something in the United States. That's just absurd.
$7.25.
That's ridiculous. That should not be a thing. All I'm saying is for full-time.
Is it not already the case?
What?
Sorry, is it not already the case that I don't know about the United States?
Real quick, we're getting towards the end here, Marcus. We're getting towards the end here.
What I'm saying is that
it's okay.
People who work for Walmart should not need to go out with their paycheck and buy Walmart stocks. It should be that when you work at Walmart, you get the stock as reduced prices because you work there. You put your labor into it. You can just take the liquid that would be associated with that reduced price share. That should be an option available to you. And there should be laws around
your salary.
Hmm?
salary will fluctuate based upon market trading price. And it's
Yeah.
already the case that you can ask your employer to pay your bonus out in shares, is it not? Like
No,
in
not
my
if you're
country,
not
it
if
is,
you're
where you
not if
can-
you're a low wage worker in the United States. You do not have that option.
Do you see what Wellspring was?
What do you
see
mean?
what Wellspring was saying a moment ago about it would just be an increase in salary if they didn't choose
Yeah.
the share option.
Which
you
you
hear
can
him say
also
that?
ask for, right? Yeah, which you can also ask for, right? You can like approach your employer and be like, "Hey, I want a raise," or "Hey, I'd like to buy shares of your company," or "Hey, next year's bonus, I'd like to have it paid out in stock of the business."
No, but
This is already the
but a
case.
com-
as far as I'm
But a company that's can say we don't do that. I want the option to be you should that should be available to your workers.
But you said you would only want to do this on voluntary basis.
Because
Why doesn't the corporation get like a say? Why
because
don't
the
they get to say
corporate
no?
because I don't consider corporations as entities with rights.
Oh,
Yeah, they're not
okay.
individuals, are they? Are they treated as individuals
In
by
the United
government?
States, they are. You Citizens United means that corporations even have the right of free speech in this country. So
Oh my God.
Oh, I think that's perhaps up for further exploration sometime. Then.
yeah,
Well, we're
That
going to
statement
continue,
you just
guys.
made.
Everybody who's in here, we're going to continue this conversation. We're just not going to be recording it live.
yeah. So
This is
I
live
gotta
on
take
YouTube
I
right
gotta
now,
take a little
so-
break. I think I got some laundry going on. I hope everyone who this is gonna be on YouTube. I'm gonna edit this up and make something nice out of it or whatever it is. But again, thank you everyone. Tomorrow is the actual interview with Professor Brian. I can't pronounce his last name. Later, who knows? And remember, July 21st is going to be our first show on Rumble. So,
Yep.
as always,
And I have 2 interviews between then, so please come to us as well.
yes, I'm going to be joining Thomas for an interview on Monday as well.
Yes, both of my interviews, hopefully. And also, Thomas's Torture Time will be starting back up soon.
Yes.
Sorry if I missed anything. I take a phone call.
No, it's no problem.
It's all right, Wellspring. We're just closing it up, man.
So-
and then we're going to jump down. Everybody in here, we're going to jump down to Trav's Tavern after this. Go ahead.
Yeah, precisely. So, I just want to say I'm going to disconnect and I'm going to end it on the stream, and I'll be back in a few. So, thank you for the claps. Thank you for the claps. Okay. I'll see you all in the Discord. Well, that was it. Hopefully that was wasn't the worst thing in the world. Hopefully the conversation was interesting. Got to hear some of my opinions, regardless of all the other stuff you usually don't hear me talk about, and hopefully you like that. So, as always, stay thinking.